Good morning, Franklin County. As another Tuesday morning with myself and Cody Booker. Liberty is Treason. And Cody, let you start off with your...
At least you introduced us this time. We've been getting in trouble for not introducing myself. Like he said, I'm Cody Booker, and if anybody wants to hunt me down and have a conversation, I'm around. And before I get started, I'd like to shout a word out for our single and one and only sponsor, and that's Pet Fence of Middle Tennessee. And I was lucky enough to receive a pet fence from these guys a few years ago, and it's honestly changed my life. I've got 3 dogs, and just the ability to be able to let them out and know that they're safe and they can only get where they're trapped in by the invisible fence is a beautiful thing. And if you're interested in a pet fence, Shane's a real good installer, and you can reach him at 615-566-4163. And today we're going to do something a little different on the show. So I'm lucky enough, and I really think that everybody should be so lucky to have someone in their life that they can call a teacher or a mentor. Someone who will listen and be attentive, but who will also scrutinize their ideas and opinions and tell you when you're wrong, or tell you when you're right, and tell you why, And I'm lucky enough to have quite a few of those in my life. Ricky's one, sitting right next to me. But the man that I consider the greatest teacher I've ever known in my life, his name is Shane Robbins, and he lives in Nashville, and we talk probably 3 or 4 times a week. And I feel that having this platform, I would be remiss and negligent of my duty to inform you if I didn't use it to give a little bit of time to my friend Shane to address the public. And he's actually written a monologue that we're going to play in just a second, and it's lengthy, but I implore you, Franklin County and listeners, please give it a listen. I really think one of the biggest problems we have in our country right now is anti-intellectualism and the lack of intellect and lack of people willing to admit that they're wrong or willing to have their ideas scrutinized or willing to listen to the other side. If you listen to other shows, you'll know that we're not trying to divide here, we're trying to unify. And I really think a key of that is listening to the other side. So, without further ado, Franklin County, I give you Shane Robbins.
Embrace imperialism or embrace yourself. You can't do both. The hardest culture to define is your own. As a dog trainer, I tell my clients that the hardest dog they will ever train is their own. The only person that I can ever completely know is myself. The only person that you can ever completely know is yourself. But there's no guarantee that I will ever know myself or that you will know yourself. Many of us live in such institutionalized lives that we don't even know ourselves, much less our spouses, kids, friends, and neighbors. What becomes of a person who is unwilling to countenance himself? What becomes of a person who at a young age was encouraged and conditioned to wear a mask or a set of masks, and he or she left that mask on or those masks on for so long that upon removal he didn't even recognize himself? He wanted to put the mask back on because that mask had ideas attached, an identity, suppositions, priorities, an agenda, a reason to be. This face looking back in the mirror is as yet undefined, unknown. Shit, should I go back to the mask, or should I learn to know myself? Should I stand naked in front of a mirror and convince myself that my chubby gut is a 6-pack? Should I stand in front of an American flag and pretend that it's merely a symbol for bravery and freedom? Should I just presume my own intellectual readiness, even in the fog of hangovers and profligate intellectual laziness and a pretty strict diet of denial and arrogance? Should I provide a public pretense of emotional stability while playing Russian roulette in the echoing chambers of my fractured mind. It is a much more difficult task to think critically of oneself and culture than it is to uncritically champion it. And it is also the only honest task. And it's the harder route. And the honest route is not always the hard route, but in this case, yeah. September 12th, 2001, I had a conversation with my mom. I, like many young men, was thinking of joining the military. The nation was in shock. Thousands had died in just a few hours in front of our eyes, leaping some of them to their deaths, most crushed, burned. And the murderers were supposedly a theocratic force needing an ass-whipping. I felt the national craving for revenge, and I felt it personally, but I had also been studying American foreign policy in depth, and I had in the years previous gained a slight understanding of our national culture, as well as our more tribal subcultures. I explained to my mom that I thought these attacks on 9/11 were fairly predictable, given our long national history of meddling and intervening in the most volatile places and people on Earth. I knew even at the age of 21 that America is an empire, that our national culture is colonial and imperial and very militant. And I knew that our imperial culture is one necessarily rooted in a 1-2 punch of denial and arrogance. Deny the abuses of power, even if those abuses of power go against yourself, and then claim the moral high ground for the exercise of that power, even if that power is abusive of yourself. I noticed a near total absence of national discussion dealing with the roots of this terrorism. Why did they hate us? Because freedom. But if you were to answer that question and give a brief history of the last 50 years, actions taken by CIA, State Department, military, you'd probably be met by the average American with disbelief, incredulity. So, it's because they hate us for our freedom. And that answer was seemingly satisfactory to large swaths of this public. I watched the anti-war movement die, despite the unsatisfactory nature of this uncritical response. There was no political home for the anti-war actors. Yet another tribe forced to yet another reservation on this continent. 9/11 was the coup d'etat that the military-industrial complex had long desired. 9/11 filled the American zeitgeist with a bloodlust that would mean 20 years and counting of profitable invasions and occupations both at home and abroad. The imperial nature of our foreign policy was home to roost now, domestically. And the American imperial public mind was so preoccupied with a want for revenge that the previous decades of Washington's murderous foreign interventions were immaterial. They were very conveniently neglected, and still are. Not really a part of the calculus. History didn't exist. History began on 9/11. There was no 9/10. Indignation is more successful when it's self-righteous. Self-righteous and blind. Even better. And humility, remorse, and regret are not features of an imperial culture. The lessons of Vietnam for the American student involve calculations of the American dead, American casualties, American treasure, and American power. America first. 2 million dead Vietnamese? Meh. The dead, with regard to the American public mind, are American dead. The other dead, insignificant. President Trump is saying repeatedly that the only way he can lose this election is if it's rigged. He's refusing to offer the promise of leaving office peacefully if he's defeated. This is a first. This is a first. This is a new level of executive attempts at autocratic tyranny. I repeat, he is refusing to give reassurances that he will leave office peacefully if he is defeated. He is saying that any defeat will involve the system being rigged. He is essentially priming his base, preparing his base to challenge the outcome if the outcome is not their preference. His hatred of the free press seems to be inversely proportionate to his adoration of our national blue standing army, what we call police. His denial of science is as deep and wide as his affection for flags, Bibles, cops, and winning at any cost. Whatever the cost to the Constitution, whatever the cost to the people, play it down. His unapologetic racism, coupled with his being endorsed enthusiastically by the Fraternal Order of Police, means that cops and racists are hand in hand, sometimes hand in glove, sometimes beating violinists at Elijah McClain's memorial. Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has said that understanding Trump is like understanding Alice in Wonderland. And I am beginning to see that simile. America is ruled by a corporate oligarchy that controls the electoral choices of the public. America has two political machines that we are all conditioned to call, quote, parties. But each party is actually a collection of tribes. Steve Bannon hates the Country Club GOP. And the Country Club GOP hates Steve Bannon. The DNC needs the votes of Democratic Socialists, but won't allow them the presidential nomination. WikiLeaks gave us the details on how Hillary rigged her own primary. Trump has appealed to multiple agencies and leaders at home and abroad around the world to try and help him defeat Biden. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have taken to the streets in these past 6 months. Coast to coast, we finally have a movement against the abuses of power rampant in the police forces nationwide. And that movement is led by black Americans under the banner Black Lives Matter because they are and have been disproportionately on the receiving end of tyranny by cop. And in that debate last week, Trump and Biden were stumbling over each other to rebuff the, quote, defund the police plank on the platform with no concern for the grim reality that modern police in America are the standing army that our forefathers have warned against. Both claim to revere the Constitution. Both take oaths to that effect. Both are liars, but one is more dangerous. Both are imperialists. Both are arrogant. Both are duopolists who have never attempted to end the two-party tyranny. despite sitting atop those two machines, theoretically. But one is more dangerous than the other. So here we are in Wonderland, learning valuable lessons in horrifying circumstances. Here we are with constitutionalists who have never studied or abided by the Constitution. Here we are with Christians who have never studied or abided by the Gospels. Here we are with fascists who claim to be classically liberal. Conservatives who don't care to conserve limitations on executive power. White supremacists sitting next to Herman Cain's ghost. And the Mad Hatter grabbing the Cheshire Pussy. We are a nation in absolute crisis. Too many of us have worn our masks for so long that we can't even see our chubby guts anymore. And too many others have refused to wear masks when our public health depended on it.
Wow, that was a lot to wrap your mind around. And I get it. Sometimes I have to sit back and digest it also. And do we have Shane on?
Shane's on.
Hey, good morning, Shane.
What's up, guys?
Hey, thank you for that monologue. I found it intriguing, enlightening, and as always, brilliant.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's good for me just to get it out.
Yeah, I get it. I struggle with being able to articulate often what I feel about the American culture and the directions that we're going also, and so it only makes sense that I'll get a radio show. But I found a lot of what you had to say interesting, and one of the questions I would have for you. Well, one thing is, let's go into your background a little bit because I want everybody to know that you come at a lot of your opinions quite honestly, in the fact that you are a white man, correct? And I hate to label white, black, or anything like that, but you are a white man, and your family is of mixed color. Your wife is Ethiopian from Africa, so you definitely have a unique perspective in a lot of things, such as BLM, as especially being a white father, knowing that you come from privilege and looking down on your children who are going to have to go through things just because of the color that you didn't have to go through.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's the best way for me to start is to tell a story about what happened in 2008, back when Blockbuster Video was still open. We had one in Bellevue, which is my side of town in Nashville. And my wife and my daughter were in Blockbuster Video looking through the family section when a couple of skinheads came up and started in on my wife. My daughter was 3 at the time, in my wife's arms. This was during the campaign when Obama's nomination through the DNC was so off-putting to so many people that that was a new kind of renaissance of white supremacy in the United States as a result of the rise of Barack Obama. And so my daughter spent, it was actually verbally vicious, but physically there were no blows thrown. The cops were called. But my daughter spent a few weeks unable to sleep well. Nightmares every night. It's still among her earliest memories. She was not quite 4. So I think it's really important that people understand that even though they themselves may not consider themselves to be prejudicial, it's very important that Americans understand that this is not a phenomenon of the past. This is very much still happening in the present. And that's why it's so important, I think, that just a few weeks before this election, we need to raise issues about what the GOP is under Trump, where the GOP is headed, and how they're going to attempt to survive the demographic shifts that are occurring when their present base is intent upon denying the continued existence of racism in America.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
Shane, that's kind of, I think, what I picked up the most from your monologue was you keep addressing over and over denial and denying the truth. And I've given this a lot of thought. You and I have spoken a lot about this, and I really am starting to wonder if that's not where the deep-seated anger in this country is coming from. You know, we often ask ourselves, where is all this anger coming from? It's almost like Ghostbusters, you know, like there's some evil entity under the country that's boiling up a little bit at a time, and it's starting to affect people over and over. And really talking to you and listening to you and giving a lot of thought, I wonder if it's not anger from denial and hypocrisy, because we deny so many truths, and we know it. And we deny it in our minds because that's the only place you can really deny it, but our hearts always know the truth. And your hearts are where your emotion comes from. So you know, for instance, we are a very bigoted country. We are a country built on systemic racism. We are a country built by slaves, and we are a country who still has people alive today that at least have spoken to their grandparents or great uncles or whoever that were actually slaves being whipped in a field. That's where we come from, but we deny it. And I really think that's what I gleaned most from your monologue was maybe where the anger is coming from.
We would like to say that there were 3 centuries of abject chattel slavery, entirely racial, the legacy of which is every government form, corporate form in America to this day is a race-based form. What color are you? Blah, blah, blah. But there were 3 centuries of abject chattel slavery in which a person's kid was not their own, in which a person's name was not their own, in which a person's mother, father, brother, sister, uncle, none of it. Such a meager cultural opportunity, yet there's still thriving that has occurred. So, you know, there's 3 centuries of slavery, 1 century of Jim Crow, 50 years of nominally being able to vote for what is always the lesser of 2 evils, especially in the cases of minorities in this country. And now the modern American conservative movement would like to pretend that racism is over in America and that black people have more opportunities than white people. And there's a genocide against white people. And all this BS. People need to stop with the BS. The reason that we have Trump as president, the reason that he has cops hand in hand with white supremacists is because the middle America is in denial. It's the same thing that MLK Jr. said. He said that it's not the KKK that frustrates him the most. It's the silent white middle class. It's the silence of the middle white America. That's what bothered Martin Luther King Jr. the most. And I got to say, I feel the same way. I mean, it's happening in my own family. My own family, my aunts, my uncles, cousins, full of Trumpers, full of evangelical Trumpers. And, you know, for me, as a father of 3 mixed children and as a husband of an immigrant from Ethiopia who is considered black, even though she's basically brown, mahogany. But she's black, and I'm white, even though I'm peach, pink when I'm embarrassed, red when I'm burned. I mean, it just doesn't make sense what we're doing here. We got to stop this continuation of identity politics. It's got to stop.
Well, what would you say to many of our listeners who might think that the president is not racist and hasn't given any indication that he may be a racist, which is an argument that I hear often in my area? What would you say to those people?
I would give them a history lesson. So the history of Donald Trump and race is not complicated. His companies have been aggressively racist for decades. He has refused brown and black-skinned people into his buildings for decades. He has dealt with dozens of lawsuits from applicants and residents. He has always dealt with the legal fallout of his company and his personal racism. And that didn't stop. I mean, on the campaign trail, the whole country knows about Donald Trump's dog whistles. So when some quote-unquote conservatives pretend that Donald Trump is never dog whistling racists, even on the debate stage, what was said 2 weeks ago, I mean, that's a phenomenal occurrence. It's definitely of note. It's something that I hope we don't lose, you know, in this mound of data that is our current informational society. Because that debate stage response, when Chris Wallace asked him, you know, are you willing to disavow white supremacists? And he goes, okay, fine, who? Fine, who? You know, he's real fussy. He goes, yeah, fine, okay, fine, yeah, I'll do it. I'll disavow them. You know, stand back and stand by. You know, if he actually wanted to provide any healing in this country, which this country needs, regardless of denial, if he actually wants to bring forth some healing in this country, he could, but he doesn't want to, for two reasons. Because he is historically a racist, period, end of story. He is such a narcissist that sometimes his racism takes a back seat, all right? But in this case, it doesn't, because he wants that vote. He wants that as part of his cobbled together, new right, alt-right, neoconservative, whatever the GOP white supremacy shoulder-to-shoulder thing is. That's what he wants. He wants to cobble and keep that constituency. And, okay, so let's continue with his history of racism. So I'm sure you guys have heard about the 5 young black boys in New York City who were accused of rape, the Central Park rape and murder.
Yeah, I saw the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, he actually took out, he actually spent his own money to advertise that these guys not only they need to be convicted, but they need to be executed despite their ages, which were like 15, 16. And it turned out, years later, they had spent all these years in prison, and they were cleared of any wrongdoing. There was genetic evidence that none of them were involved in the murder or the rape. Yet he never recanted all of what he did. So he's all about law and order. He's the law and order president. But the most high-profile case that he ever contributed his public voice to, he was dead wrong, and he never apologized. Just like when he was running 4 years ago, he said, when asked, "You ever ask forgiveness of God?" He said, "No, I never have." Now that is on video. The whole interview is. I'm not taking him out of context. So the fact that the people under these steeples will just post up for Donald Trump, even now, 4 years later, as we know exactly who this man is, it is absurd. He's an authoritarian. He is trying to aggregate more and more power into his own hands. He's talking about serving 16 years to his rallies. This guy is unhinged. And y'all keep making excuses for him. And I'm telling you, we're going to have the same phenomenon, whether it's on the right or the left. It'll just be a different brand of tyranny. But we keep aggregating power into the executive the way that we're doing and the way that Donald Trump is attempting to do. I'm telling you, this nation is headed directly for an abject authoritarian tyranny.
So, Shane, listening to what you're saying there, are you advocating to, not vote for Trump or to vote for Biden in this situation? I'm trying to figure out, I feel like I know which way you sit on this fence, but I want, maybe you to explain it a little better for people listening.
Well, okay, so first of all, I would say that Tennessee's Republican Party should have come out years ago against Trump, and they should have been uniting with other state Republican parties to challenge Trump's renomination and reelection. That's how bad this guy is. And he's going to be bad for them in the long run. In the long run, he is really harming the GOP. See, I don't want us to be a one-party system. I've always advocated for many parties. I want more parties on the ballot. I want as many as possible. I want a competition of ideas. I am not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, and I never will be. So first of all, I don't advocate for a one-party system. I don't hope that the GOP loses all of their power to the Democrat Party and we just have a one-party political system. Because in Tennessee, we essentially already do. And it's not constructive. It's a single party that doesn't actually represent the totality of us. But it's in our two-party winner-take-all system, it's what we've got. So having said that he should not even be on the ticket, that party should have already abandoned him to every degree that they possibly could have, just to distance themselves and save themselves from the fallout of what this man really is. But since nobody did that, and since the Republicans have lined up like a bunch of weak sycophants under this tin pot wannabe dictator, I absolutely advocate voting for anybody else except for Donald Trump. I'm probably going to vote for Joe Jorgensen. And the reason is we're not a swing state. So a vote for Biden in this state, it makes a little sense, but it makes more sense for us to build up minor parties so that next time minor parties can be a part of the debate process.
I too think... go ahead, Ricky.
So how do you feel and how do you answer when someone says, well, a vote for Biden or a vote for Joe Jorgensen is taking away a vote from a candidate who has a chance to win? Because that's the thing you hear. Because I'm with you on that, honestly. I have very adamantly stated to anybody who was asking the question how I feel about the presidential election, who I feel like I'm, would do the best job. I've said many times it's the Libertarian candidate who I believe would be the best for the position. But you know as well as I do, she's got less of a chance than a snowball making it through hell of winning this presidential election. So how do you respond to someone who says, well, a vote for an independent candidate or a different Libertarian Party is taking a vote away from someone who has a chance?
Yeah, well, winning is not the goal for Joe Jorgensen or the Libertarian Party, regardless of what they say publicly. The goal is actually to get to a percent, and it can only happen incrementally over a period of decades, because our elections presidentially are every 4 years. So it's going to take many presidential election cycles in order for any minor party to get to that 15% threshold that is necessary, 15% of the vote that is necessary to get them into those nationally televised debates in which their voice and their opinions are going to be expressed and broadcasted, and then the American people can say, oh, who the hell is Joe Jorgensen? Or who the hell is this guy or this chick? And that's what we need. And that's why, I am thinking generationally, intergenerationally. I'm thinking, what is going to best serve my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids? What system is it that actually reflects this notion of liberty or freedom? And right now we have a political system that pretends to be reflective of liberty, but it most certainly is not. And so I don't just think that, Donald Trump is bad. I also think that Joe Biden has historically been miserable. I don't understand why he is the nominee. But he is. And so it's Trump versus Biden. And if Tennessee was a swing state, I'll tell you, I would probably go ahead and vote for Biden, just because it would be that important to get Donald Trump out of office. He is actively saying he won't leave peacefully to his rallies, to the crowds at his rallies. He's saying this over and over and over. His lawyer, who went to prison for him, his lawyer goes to prison. He writes a book while he's in prison. And in the book, he says, I don't think he's going to leave peacefully. I know this man. I worked for him for more than 10 years. And I think you guys have a real problem when this tradition of a peaceful transference of power is supposed to go down. If he does lose, will he leave? And if he doesn't leave, what is the process by which, and what is the public response to that process? We really do need to be thinking and talking about this. Now, people keep stumping for either one of these guys. The reality is there's no reason to vote for Donald Trump. He has demonstrated that he does not have a regard for the Constitution. He doesn't care about the limits on executive power. That is a humongous piece of what we are as a nation. Humongous. And he has no regard for that Constitution. I don't think we've ever been in this situation before. It certainly is something for us to talk about at length. He's actively telling his base that he will not leave peacefully if he loses this election, because every outcome that involves his loss is a rigged outcome.
You're talking about abusing the Constitution. Has that not been every president pretty much going back past Bush, probably even to Clinton?
But are we talking about flouting our entire electoral process, what's left of the electoral process, to preserve a little dictatorship for the man? He's talking about wanting to serve 16 years. He's talking about doing what FDR did, and he does it all the time. He says it so much, there's no way to discount the reality that he's saying it.
So what you're saying is to the level that he disregards the Constitution is greater than most.
Oh, it's not even close. When's the last time y'all heard a president say, if I lose, it's because it's rigged and I'm not leaving peacefully? When's the last time you heard that? And why are we equating, more minor constitutional, because they've all been crap. That's why I oppose both parties. Every president of my lifetime, since Reagan, I was born in 80, every single one of them. Constant invasions, expansion of empire, abuse of domestic populations, whether it's minorities, all. It's not just, it's all. They fail, and we continue to vote DRRD, and nothing. Well, of course we're at this point now where we have this wannabe dictator. Of course we are.
Well, I think you've nailed the problem, and it just hasn't really been said explicitly, which is what Ricky and I've been trying to do on this show, is explain how partisanship is what's killing the country and killing the Constitution and killing American values and killing everything that we believe in. And going back to how you started this last little bit, and you said that you couldn't believe, or what the GOP should have done was disavow this dude years ago. And I don't disagree with you. I think he's the most dangerous president we've ever had by far, and I think another term could essentially ruin this country. But allow me to express a quote, and this is a direct quote from a United States senator in regards to Trump. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. You know how to make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell. And this U.S. senator also said, if you can't admire Joe Biden as a person, then there's probably, you've got a problem. Now, a lot of people may think that was Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid or one of the Democrats, but no, that was actually Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, who has been, over the last 3 years, at the right hand of Donald Trump, constantly praising him. And I really think that history isn't going to be kind to Senator Graham. I think that Senator Graham's probably about to lose his seat to a Democrat nonetheless. But I think what Graham has done is kind of exactly what you're saying, is he's fallen into that party line, that partisanship line so hard that he's willing to even sacrifice himself and throw himself on the sword for the good of the party, regardless of what the party does. We've gotten to this zero-sum game point to where nobody cares what either party does as long as their party wins. You know, I've spoken to Democrats and Republicans alike, and for the most part, it seems that way, and it seems to really be amplified by whoever's in power at the time. You know, whether when Obama was in power, it was the Democrats. When Trump was in power, it's the Republicans.
You said somebody wins. For somebody to win, there has to be an end game. What's the end game to win?
Well, I really think Shane kind of addressed that earlier too, and we have too, in that we are no longer a democratic republic or a democracy. We are a corporate oligarchy. And I mean that's exemplified really by our president, whose only scoreboard seems to be the stock market, and it seems to be the Dow Jones and the S&P, the things that most of us can't even afford to invest in. But the corporations who he represents and who our Congress represent, they're doing great. You know, during this COVID thing, we've had the largest transfer of wealth again in human history, and it's transferred to the working people who sweat for it, to the big corporations who, in a good fair part, don't, and are the recipients of a corrupt system that constantly benefits them. So I guess the answer to your question was the end goal is to support the corporations and support the banks. And to do so is on the backs of the American worker.
Yeah, your comment about Lindsey Graham it's a great one. I'm glad you brought that up. I have an idea, kind of a theory about that. In the beginning, Lindsey Graham was very vocal against Donald Trump. He was one of the most outspoken Trump haters there was. And after Trump came to power, he came around. He came what appeared to be in line. But after reading Bob Woodward's book, Rage, I think that Lindsey Graham has been playing a role these last couple of years. I think he has been, because Donald Trump's personality is such that he really only likes people who kiss his ass. So his administration is only full of people who will kiss his ass. And the only way he's going to listen to something that Lindsey Graham has to say is if Lindsey Graham spends a little bit of time kissing his ass. And so that's what he's done. Now, I have disagreed with Lindsey Graham for decades. He's not my boy. I don't love the guy at all. But I do think that he has put on an act just so that he can stay in Donald Trump's ear, because I think he understands exactly how dangerous Donald Trump is with those nuclear codes. And so I think it's quite possible that he has thrown himself upon the sword in a very different way.
That's an interesting perspective. Maybe he's done it in a benevolent way because somebody needs to stay close to him. And I think what you said about Trump really only regarding those who kiss his butt is absolutely true. I think that's evident by how often the administration around him changes and how often those changes are based on any sort of rebuttal. You know, if Donald says something and then somebody comes out with a counter argument or opposes Donald in any way, then boom, they're just horrible people and they're fired.
Yeah, I watched a documentary a couple weeks ago called, I forget the title, but it was discussing it was a documentary filled with psychologists and psychiatrists who were discussing malignant narcissism and the evidence of Donald Trump being a malignant narcissist. And it was pretty clinical. I mean, there was obviously production, and there was definitely an attempt at persuasion. But, you know, he has pretty much every marker for it. Sadism, paranoia, narcissism. I mean, he's got the personality for it. And if you read about him, if you read from people who have worked with him for decades, people who are not, you know, stumping for him, if you're reading people who have been around him who are not solipsistic, that is to say, who do not simply worship winning, who also value truth. See, if you don't value the truth just as much as you value, if not more than you value winning, then of course you're going to be flagrantly dishonest. And Donald Trump has an entire, 50-year history in business of total dishonesty. I mean, he's been ripping people off left and right using muscle power, legal power. He's been doing that his whole life. He's not a successful businessman. Not in the sense that you would think, not in the sense that it's been purveyed. One of the things that bothers me the most right now about the right-wing media is it seems that the right-wing, you typically see the American flag, and under that you're going to see a Donald Trump flag, and under that you're going to see a Gadsden flag. So you got this iconography that suggests that, American right-wing media has some root in the Constitution, and that's the most important document that undergirds the bulk of the planks on the platform, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not true. That has not been demonstrated to be true. The right-wing media right now that serves that public, the Gadsden flag public, the American flag, Trump flag public, with the Trump head on the Rambo body, they're not serving the Constitution right now. They're serving Trumpism right now. And Trumpism is a distinct piece of trash. It is not constitutional. Trump's leadership is not constitutional in any way, shape, or form. He does not. I doubt that he has spent any time reading it. Just like I doubt that he spent much time reading the Bible. I mean, this is not a person that you can trust to defend the Constitution. The president's swear an oath to defend the Constitution. He is flouting it. He's even flouting the electoral processes that keep that document whole.
Well, I find it difficult to believe that most reasonable people can't watch the antics of Donald Trump in any studious manner and not find the same things that I find, that at least he's not good for the country. But more importantly, what got us here? And I mean, the fact is that Donald Trump's not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. And as far as that goes, he's really just an amplifier that seems to amplify a lot of the problems that we have as a country. So
yeah, when we need a uniter, what we've got is a total divider.
Well, we elected Obama, who was supposed to be the greatest unifier of all time, who I supported for his first term, and he ended up proving to not be what he was touted to be. Which tells me that either he was a disingenuous liar, or that there's somebody else behind those puppet strings yanking the strings that are, making our presidents amplify certain portions of the
Donald
demographic
Trump,
opinion.
We got to talk about the press. He's going after the press. Let's talk about our constitutional rights here. You are the press. This is the press. The radio is the press. Newspapers, blogs.
Sure, and if he heard what we had to say today, he would call us garbage and fake news, I'm sure.
He's actually telling his constituents and his crowds, to boo all the press like it's some monolithic satanic entity. This cult has gone too far. If we don't have a free press, what do we have? What is our information source if there isn't a free press? Whatever the administration stamps is okay, right? So that's what his followers prefer now?
But in some fair part, hasn't the press earned criticism?
Yes.
The press should always be earning criticism. The function of the press, look at how many perspectives there are. The idea is that it's monolithic. No, it's not. The liberal media. Really? So you guys actually think that the corporatist CNN media represents in any way, shape, or form a classical liberalism? No, it doesn't.
No, I think they represent whatever will sell ads. I promise you that CNN would be the most conservative outfit in the world if they knew it could make them more money than what they're doing now. That's how corporations work. They're just money driven.
They are quite conservative economically. I mean, their advertising demonstrates it. They are. But no, we don't need to be killing the press. We don't need to be saying the press is the greatest enemy of the American people day in and day out for 5 years, which is what we've heard. No. He shouldn't. No leader in the United States should be saying that if he values the Constitution.
Yeah, because he's destroying a fundamental pillar. I mean, and by fundamental pillar, I mean it's in the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. A fundamental pillar is freedom of the press, and for a reason. And if he continues to destroy it,
state. I mean, it's called the fourth estate. One of the reasons why his ignorance and his ineptitude as a statesman, one of the reasons that he's so inept is because he doesn't study. He doesn't understand the implications of ridding a nation of a free press. And he doesn't care. It's just like he doesn't play it down. Always play it down. You know, rile them up. Get them emotional. Be persuasive. Play it down. Don't appeal to their intellect. Appeal to them emotionally. Pure demagoguery. Pure demagoguery. Constantly with the Twitter. Riling them up. Separating them. Conquering them. No effort to unite. None. He doesn't have it in him. This guy's got to go. Got to go. Got to. It's huge. I'm very disappointed in Tennessee for continuing, because I travel the state and I work. Yeah, I'm very disappointed in seeing all these Trump flags, all these people with these Gadsden flags under their Trump flags, as though those two comport with one another. So contradictory. The Gadsden flag is such a fantastic piece of our history, such an important piece of our history, and it's being just spat upon by these Trumpers.
You know, we'll go to the point. When did the media become a reality TV show instead of a information? You know, when did CNN and Fox and all these, they go from being, you know, PBS to primetime, you know, looking to try to grab those ratings? The problem with the media now is we're not here, and I say this, we as including myself sometimes, we're not here to just inform you of the facts and lay it all out on the table and let you form your own opinion. Everyone has a slant, one way or the other, and like Cody said, it's all driven by, you know, the mighty dollar. You know, it's what is going to sell advertising on your network, and the people who tune into you. What do you need to say to keep them tuned into the next block so you can sell another, you know, 180-second block of advertising? When did that change? When did we lose, you know, when did media become entertainment instead of informative?
Yeah, it presupposes that we ever did have a media actually functioning in an objective way. I do think that journalism, when there were fewer streams of it, I think it was in some ways easier to control. And I think the journalistic integrity, while biases still obviously existed, but I think journalistic integrity back then was less under question because there weren't so many BS sources. So right now we have this girth of information coming from so many different sources. And actually, in the end, that is preferable if you have a public, a discerning public, who can manage information and take that data and subject it to scrutiny using their logic, removing contradictions, and they can be left with something resembling a truth or somewhere near a truth, maybe a lowercase c truth. But we don't have that public. We have a public that literally voted for a reality TV star.
Yeah, I want to leave one thought. We've now got to a time where it's not who can get the correct information out there and do the best of their source. It's now to the point, like you said, there's so many different entities out there who are releasing all the same information. It's who can get there first with it and who can scream the loudest with it. And it doesn't always have to be correct. And that's what scares me is people now, you see it on all social media, you see it everywhere. You see it in news because you see more retractions now than I've ever seen in my life, where it doesn't matter if you get it right. It's that you got it first. And that's what scares me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, run with it. Run with it. You know, we'll deal with the fallout later. Go with it. This is going to sell the ad space. This is going to keep them tuned in. Yeah, I don't watch corporate news. I used to. I know what they're about. I've watched them all, and I dislike them all. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, I don't watch that stuff. That's not informative. That is persuasive, emotive. It's not intellectual. It's not genuinely concerned with our Bill of Rights. It's not attempting to inform a public to a point where a public can elect a human being with a decent aspiration for the growth of virtue and better values for the nation than what Donald Trump and Mike Pence are bringing. You know, yeah, people need to turn off cable TV. They need to turn off that in those news stations for damn sure. Absolutely.
Well, hey, and Shane, on that note, I guess we'll have to wrap up the call with you. The show's about to wrap up. I'm going to say a few words, but as always, it's been fun and entertaining and educational, and I appreciate your perspective, and thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, buddy. And for the rest of you out there, I really hope that I achieved my goal, which wasn't so much to slam a president or to slam someone that you support, but moreover to allow you to hear a different perspective from someone who is intelligent. It's so often in our body politic, it seems, that we get caught in these echo chambers, and I really think that it's a lot due to social media, where we believe that everyone must be for a certain ideal or for a certain individual or support a certain individual, because it seems that way when you look around, and you wonder how it is that Joe Biden could be polling 58% and Donald Trump only 42%. Or you
Play
wonder,
the best of the 80s, 90s.
You wonder where these people are. But they're out there, and they're everywhere, and they're not your enemy. They're your brother. They're not the bad guy. They're your neighbor. They just have a different opinion than you based on different facts. And if we sit down and we listen to each other and we realize that other people have other opinions, then maybe we can pull ourselves out of this mess rather than push ourselves deeper down into pits of despair.
All right, thanks for tuning in today. This has been Liberty is Treason here on WCT. Second and fourth Tuesday of each month, you can catch this program at 8 a.m.